We live in a world devoid of originality. A world where, every other day, something we used to enjoy is dug up and paraded around, either for a new generation or for nostalgia cash grabs. Most often, this takes the form of a reboot, where major changes are made to characters in order to distance itself from the original. Less often, soft reboots, where the new picks up where the old left off in order to attract the old fan base, while making minor changes to the cast to reflect the new age it's airing in. Very rarely does something return to us with very little to no change, allowing us to enjoy what we used to without needing to search for deeper political or social meanings. Hi there, Skeletor here, and today we're talking about Invader Zim, Enter the Florpus. What makes this movie great is that there's no moral, no agenda being pushed, and instead, it's just pure human and irking stupidity, like the show has always been about, which really sold me on how much its creator, Jonan Vasquez, really cares about his work. After Hey Arnold and Rocko's Modern Life, I was really worried that Nickelodeon was going to wrangle Jonan into some sort of compromise, forcing him to cover topics like political views or identity politics or, God forbid, tolerance. But it seems the only thing that suffers here is the animation budget and art style. Gone is the signature art style of everything being sharp, thin, dark, and dirty, instead replaced by what appears to be a softer, brighter, rounder world, though it's still just as filthy as ever. It's almost like a parody of the original style, which is kind of funny when you realize that the original Invader Zim show was a cleaned up version of the art style used for Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. In a way, this kind of makes Florpus a parody of a parody. And while we're here, can we just take a moment to appreciate the fact that somebody saw this and decided to give its creator a show aimed at children? Amazing. Overall, I'd say Florpus feels like an extra long episode more than a movie, but then the same could be said for Futurama, and honestly those felt pretty faithful. Something this movie benefits from that not a lot of people know about is the Invader Zim comic book. A lot of jokes and elements are actually lifted straight from the first few issues of the comic series. From Zim having been in hiding during the 9-year time gap between show ending and comic beginning, to Dib being more chair than man, and getting Tack's old ship up and running. Essentially, these were good ideas that became great ideas by virtue of transferring from writer to editor to publication, to then being rethought out by an animation crew for the final cut of the movie. A great example of this is in the beginning of the movie, or the first page of the very first comic book. Originally, we meet a new character, Recap Kid, who explains the premise of the show and who everyone is in a very spastic fashion, mentioning that Zim's been in hiding since the events of the show, and without him, Dib has grown fat and disgusting from never leaving his computer feed of Zim's house, his butt fusing to his chair. Instead, the movie gives us an epic anime recap, with Dib doing the voiceover. Once Gaz goes into Dib's room, and we see him for the first time, he's the one who explains his motives for not showering or leaving his room. There's a lot of one-for-one scenes that are lifted straight from the comic, but they play out so much better in animation. In fact, I'd say the only animated joke that sticks out visually as missing the mark is right after Zim takes over and Dib wakes up. He sticks his head out the window and yells up to Zim like, "You'll never get away with this!" I can't hear you. What? Huh? What did you say? And this goes on for way longer than it needed to, especially since they just blatantly reused the same two still shots over and over again for this gag. There's one part that could be seen as social commentary in regards to movies using the concept of phases and then needing to pull new ideas out of their butts to keep people guessing, but maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Probably my favorite part that completely took me by surprise is when Zim goes from sad and pathetic to crazy maniac. The fact that Zim's plan worked and it wasn't a dream sequence completely got me, and I absolutely loved it. The plan itself is pretty simple. Since Zim realized he can't get his tallest to come to Earth, he'll just bring Earth to the tallest, even if it means dumping Earth on a collision course with the Urkin Armada. Early on in the movie, Professor Membrane reveals that he's discovered a new energy field emitted only by children that he's learned to harness using a special wrist device. Zim then fused the device with a sentient alien goo that allowed him to warp Earth all the way across the galaxy and directly into the Urkin Armada's flight path. This, of course, opens up a rift called a Florpus. Basically, it's a black hole, but instead of destroying, let's say Earth, it smashes all possible realities of Earth together. This is probably the only time in the film where it feels like the stakes are high. We've seen Earth yanked out of its orbit before, and we've always returned to our orbit, or our status quo. And it's the same with everything else here. We've seen Zim try to bring the tallest to Earth. We've seen Dib try to prove the existence of aliens to his dad. The Florpus, on the other hand, well, now that's a whole new tub of worms. Eventually, Earth gets sucked into it, and it's here that we get a really cool, albeit incredibly short look at the main characters in different art styles. Adventure Time Zim, Puppet Zim, Hanna-Barbera Zim. But of course, our hero saved the day at the last possible second, and the Earth returns to its original point in space, leaving the Irken Armada barreling towards the Florpus. Because, in typical Zim fashion, Earth was saved without actually solving any real problems. But this just returns us to our status quo, and, as I stated earlier, it all plays out like an extended episode rather than a movie. Was this worth the 13-year wait? Not if you've read the comics. But if you haven't, or you're just new to Zim, I highly recommend you check this out. I'd even go as far as to say that this is a must-watch. The humor still retains its dark, techno-gothic atmosphere. Gurr is still the show's main source of LOL random humor, Gaz is still sarcastic and angry, and every scene in this movie looks like it's been painted with stains. Seriously, look at those chairs. Who spilled gunk all over them? And don't even get me started on the toilets. I loved every second of this, but then I was a diehard fan of Zim back in the day. It was funny, it was faithful to the original, and best of all, it never felt like it was spinning its wheels. Every scene, and even throwaway jokes like the ham, kept moving the plot forward. Except for the final joke, which brings us full circle back to the first season of the show. In Season 1, Episode 17, The Mega Doomer, Zim acquires a mech suit tank thing, aptly named the Mega Doomer, that comes equipped with a faulty cloaking field. Basically, the mech can turn invisible, but not the person driving it. Shenanigans ensue, and the mech self-destructs on Dib's front lawn, with Zim revealing that this was all just an elaborate ploy to steal Dib's camera. Florpus ends on pretty much the same note, with Zim trying to salvage his ruined plan by saying that it was all a ruse, so that he could steal some random, pointless item from Dib. This time a clown trinket statue in place of a camera. While you could say that this is lazy writing, I like to think that it's Jonan bringing everything back full circle. The loose ends aren't tied up, Dib arguably defeats Zim, and Zim gets the last laugh by pretending that his defeat was actually part of a much larger scheme that he has going on. In this way, it easily sets up for the show's return since, at its core, the show never bothered to tie up plot holes and loose ends, and never tried to provide any kind of moral. Instead, choosing to focus on how stupid the humans are, even if the Irkens are just as dumb. And the ending of Florpus certainly returns us to that golden standard. Sadly, the show probably won't be returning in the near future, since it took this long to see Zim return, and even then it's mostly just rehashed comic book plot lines, meaning originality is a little hard to come by here. Regardless, Invader Zim Enter the Florpus is easily one of the best things I've seen on Netflix in a long time, and that's not just nostalgia talking. I highly recommend checking this out. For Zeitgeist, I'm Skeletor, reminding you to pound that sub button and hit the like. And let us know in the comments what you'd like to see a review of next. Zeitgeist. Oh!